Hey guys, Matt Lighty here, and today's video we're just talking a little bit about chance orbs. It's something that's become more prevalent this league now that we have a button in the crafting bench that lets us just scour chance things. That, in combination with the new Bound by Destiny jewel, has a lot of people, well, making uniques that they didn't normally give a shit about that are influenced, and we're just going to talk about that. So first off, the reason Bound by Destiny is so good is because it has multiple tiered influence bonuses. Typically people like to ride in the 2 slot because the 2 slot is just super powerful for a lot of things. It's pretty easy to run. So an example of a really powerful 2 slot or even a 4 slot are things just as simple as 15% increased intelligence. So anybody doing any stat stacker, and it's the same for dex and strength here, any stat stacker you can run 2 influenced items for these 2 meager passive points, which when running the exact same uniques you normally run, getting a huge amount of increased of an attribute. There are just some good ones aside from that. Some things like regenning 35% of your life over 1 second every 4 seconds ends up being a large portion of life regen. So here's an example of a person using, well, you have a lot of people here using them because it's a very popular unique, but here's a person using one just for its 2 stat, again, just the life regen. They have a hunter glove, which is what they would normally have for a crafted glove anyway, and then their goal is hunter. Now, there's a couple ways to make something like a specific unique, unique from a base. Again, the odds of chancing things are not specifically known. However, we do have a loose idea of the tiers. So tier 4 or 5 being the common tier, 1 in a few hundred. Tier 3, which is 1 in a few thousand. Tier 3 is 1 in multiple a couple tens of thousands. So you're looking in the 10, 20, 30,000 chance orb range. This is a lot of chance orbs. And that's for something like a tier 2, where you just saw the guy wearing a goal. That's a Raven Mask. And it's actually less of a problem when it's a singular unique base. So the Raven Mask being the only thing that the goal is under, meaning if you chance a unique on a Raven Mask, it is becoming a goal. It adds a level of certainty to it. Now, it doesn't increase your odds necessarily, but what it does do is it means you're not going to have your base eaten, right? So you have to make a Hunter Raven Mask and then scour chance it, or you could use an Omen of Fortune, i.e. the old trash to treasure, to guarantee it. This is very pricey in trade, to then guarantee that. And that would guarantee it if you were doing a Raven Mask or any other singular unique base. However, if you wanted something like a Headhunter, now you start talking about leather belts. Now, half of these don't actually drop in the base game. Bear's Girdle drops off a boss, Cyclopean Quill drops off a safe house, Gluttony's base game, Headhunter's base game, Immortal Flesh's base game, Leash of Ablation's base game, Pyroglass's base game, Umbilicus's base game, Wormswolten's base game. And they're all basically a low tier, and then there's, Headhunter. So, does that mean the odds of getting the Headhunter intrinsically go down because you have that? Well, not necessarily, but what it does mean is almost guaranteed if you were to make 1,000 unique leather belts from a influence base that you did, meaning either you're buying or using like a hunter orb and a leather belt to get the base influence and then attempting to get into it, you're most likely, almost guaranteed in the first couple thousand uniques to have your belt base be gobbled up by hitting a lesser belt, because the odds of hitting a Gluttony are only 1 in 1,000 versus the odds of hitting a Headhunter is 1 in multiple hundreds of thousands. So the odds are then not just can I get to 100,000, it's can I get to 100,000 without also proccing the 1 in 1,000. So that's why things like, high tier or tier 0, even tier 1 or even tier 2 uniques start getting really, really fucky, except when there's things that don't have, again, multiple bases. So Leather Belt being a T0, absolutely fucked, right? But you do something like an engraved greatsword to try to make a multi-influence Rakiatas. Well, there's only one outcome. Again, now, is it going to take 1 in a couple 100,000? Yes. However, that's when the cost of a couple 100,000 scour chance then becomes way less than using an Omen of Fortune and guaranteeing it. Meaning, in any case point where you have an idea of what Bound of Destiny you want to do, whether it's a 2, 4, or 6 influence, you can then get a multi-modded engraved sword, meaning you make 1 hunter, 1 crusader, awaken orb them together, and then use your omen to make your Rakiatas that is now Hunter Crusader or Shaper Elder or whatever you want, right? So it's not as cut and dry as just, can I get to 100,000 without occurring? It's, is this more economical? Is this more feasible to do it? Like, nobody in their right mind is using, even the whaliest of whales are not blowing whatever 10 divines per Omen of Fortune on leather belts to try to get the one in multiple tens of thousands. They'd rather just pay the 2 mirrors to get a Shaper Elder one because it's actually cheaper. But for things like Raven Mask, things like an engraved sword, when there's only one unique base, that's when it becomes much more economical. Now, just for context, like, getting a tier 2 being one in multiple tens of thousands is still very unlikely. So if you're trying to chance, for example, a glorious plate, right, you have things like a Calm's Heart being tier 2 and Perfidy being tier 3, you're going to see 10 or 15 Perfidies still on the way on average to getting a Calm's Heart. So this has to be really something you care about as far as a project, which really only applies to Bound by Destiny, or something like, you know, using like an Eternity Shroud or replica Eternity Shroud to get that, all your items being shaped, that sort of thing. So it just kind of precludes you using certain uniques, but it does let you, if you want to, as a more fun project, build towards having a future where it's like, I know I'm going to be using a Blunderbore, I know I'm going to be using a Gull, so let me get a Shaper Elder one, because then eventually Blunderbore is a bad example when using Glimpse, but, you know, Eternity Shroud is going to be one of those things where you can work towards it as a project because you have the ability to. So that's what Chance Orbs are doing. It's they're through this new crafting system. It allows you at least the avenue to entertain the idea of scour chancing much more low tier uniques that are of higher value. Because tier 2s are like still really a chore, but tier 3s and tier 4, 5s are very much within the realm of possibility. Now that it gets more complicated when you have tier 4 or 5s that you want that also have other checkpoints, I would say. So using an honor home is really, you could probably guarantee a couple of these a day from scour chancing, especially influence ones, but something like an honor home you want to double crop, so you got a gate behind a gate, and that's where it gets a little bit tricky. So back to the Bound by Destiny. Some people are using these for just their 2 things. Like, this is a very common one. We talked about the 15% intelligence. That's a very, very strong 2-1, because again, you're spending, you know, a very minimal amount of points on something you already probably are going to have influenced. Talk about a hyper whale. Here's a guy using a Crusader and Elder Mageblood with an int corruption that does have the attribute. So this is like the upper echelon of what's possible, but there's no fucking way this guy scour chances. He definitely purchased it from a div card, because there are div cards that give double influenced items. And the 2 big ones I would say are Prejudice and Costly Curio. These are the ones that give you a single influence and a double influenced item. Now, funnily enough, these cards drop in different ways. This one drops only in Redeemer influence maps. You can't get it from a reward type thing. And the Costly Curio drops in Museum's Primordial Block Sanctuary, which is different altogether. They're quite rare div cards. You know from like the div card waiting Discord that these aren't the most common. So I don't really think there's much validity in like farming out the div cards, but I could see in trade there maybe being an avenue to purchase them, as that being a thing of like hitting a meme unique that now has intrinsically more value, because you can effectively add the cost of, you know, the Omen of Fortune to a unique. If you hit something like a Gull and it hits an influence, it kind of in a way could tack on like 10 div to the cost. But yeah, here's a guy using both the 2 and the 4 set. He's using the int and also the spell crit base, because he's got 4 Shaper items and 2 Crusader items. So it's not unruly to, you know, build your way into getting the 4 set. The 6 one's kind of a crazy stretch. So it gets really difficult. And especially if you're using a lot of uniques, because some of them are non-negotiable, like Shaper's Touch will only ever be shaped, and this guy's using Energy Blade, which isn't real. So, and again, his Mage Blood, he hasn't sprung for a crazy one. So it starts getting really crazy at the cost. Thankfully, things like Calandra's Touch does respect the influence when it transitions over. So it's a copy, so this does count as having 2 Shaper items. But yeah, it's just like a really funny avenue for building. People call them like the new Watcher's Eyes, and they definitely do fit a similar niche, although they're much more build deep and expensive, though it's a funny thing. And then the Scour Chance Benchcraft basically unlocked a lot of fun potential for these type of things. Same with the Exalted Orb for Shaper and Exalted Orb for Elder. So let me know what you guys think about the new Chance Orb craft, the new Bound by Destiny, what fun stuff you could do, because there is a lot of fun things. And although some things like an Escha's Mirror will never be influenced because it's a boss drop, it doesn't stop people from still enjoying the sweet 2-point int or 2-point dex or 2-point strength, because those are very, very low effort needed to come by. But that's it. I'm Matt Lighty. I hope you guys have a good day. I'll see you guys in the next video. And yeah, Lighty out. Bye.